Good day to all of you. Today's topic for my presentation is teaching short story. So let us first understand what a short story is. A short story tells us about a single event or experience. It focuses on one major theme throughout the story. It is derived from imagination and hence it's a fictional piece of art. The length of the short story runs from 500 to 15,000 words. Like any other story, a short story has a beginning, middle, and an end, and it creates an impression on the readers. Now let us know the 5 elements of a short story. The first one is setting, then character, conflict, plot, and theme. Setting tells you the location of the story. It tells the readers where and when the story takes place. Characters are people, animals, things that are involved in the plot of the story. There can be talking animals, fantasy characters, etc. There are 2 major types of characters that has to be there in a story. One is the protagonist, who is the major character and is usually the good guy, and the second one is antagonist, who creates conflicts for the main character and is usually considered as the bad guy. Conflict is the main problem the protagonist is trying to solve. Something troubling or bad that has happened in the story can be considered as conflict, and conflicts are usually resolved towards the end of the story. A plot is a structural sequence or a series of events through which the writer reveals what is happening, to whom, and why. Theme is like a soul of the story. It is what a story is all about. Theme can be expressed in one word like love, friendship, and solitude. Basically, theme is the central idea or main message the author wants his readers to understand and to live by. Now let us briefly understand the structure of a short story with the help of the plot diagram. Initially, towards the left hand side, bottom, we have exposition. The upward arrow towards the climax is the rising action. The highest point, the peak of the story, is the climax. Then we have the falling action and resolution. At the center of the plot diagram, we have the conflict. Exposition is the starting of the story. It is the beginning part of the story which introduces characters, setting, and the conflict. Rising action happens when the conflict is addressed by the main characters in the story, when things get piled up. It is a part when the protagonist faces crisis or conflicts. Climax is the highest or the peak point of the story. It is the most interesting and breathtaking point of the story. It presents the protagonist's most challenging moment. Falling action happens instantly after the climax. It reveals the consequences, either good or bad, the characters need to deal with after turning point of events. During the falling action, the problems are slowly getting resolved, and finally we have a resolution or ending or denouement. A resolution tells what happens to the characters after the problem or conflict is being resolved. It leaves readers with certain emotions such as sadness, happiness, disappointment, pity, or even heartbreak. In order to have a broader idea about how to teach short stories using different ways, I have considered these 2 research papers. One is a case study of the use of short stories, and the other one is an article on teaching of literary texts in an interesting way. Let us look at the first research paper, that is a case study of the use of short stories in junior secondary classroom in Hong Kong. This research paper starts with what is the impact of a good short story on students. So, a good short story can draw child's attention, stimulate his or her imagination and desire to use the language. The research was intended to find out whether the students would become more confident in using English with the use of different activities in the pre-reading, while reading, and post-reading stages, which included predicting the content and main characters involved in the stories, designing a new book cover, and reviewing ending of the stories. 2 research questions were taken up. Will the students become more interested in English with the use of short stories? The second one was, will the students become more confident in using English with the use of different activities in pre-reading, while reading, and post-reading stages? The approach that was used during research was narrative approach, wherein 2 short stories were presented to the students in the form of storytelling. In the first session, most of the students found the story very interesting. They were very attentive to the lessons and laughed happily. They also participated actively in the lesson, in guessing the content of the story and the main characters involved. However, in the second session, many students were not attentive to the lessons and found the story boring. One of them even fell asleep. To conclude, based on the findings of the conducted research study, it is considered that using short stories will not make students become more interested in English unless the stories are carefully chosen in terms of content and the level of difficulty of the vocabulary used. Coming to the second article, Teaching of Literary Text, Teaching a Short Story by Prithvi Narayan Shrestha. This article gives you an idea of how to teach literature at school level. The article tells you how you can teach a short story to school students. So these are the steps following which we can teach a short story. We can start with warm-up activity by giving cards and asking students to write a moment of their life which is similar to the short story that you are going to teach. Then comes stage 1. In this stage, you are supposed to read the story by yourself and ask the students to read the conversation and then ask general questions. Then comes stage 2. Here, understanding the story is the major part. So, you are supposed to explain the incidents of the story and encourage the students to relate it to real life. One can even explain certain parts in the mother tongue if the students are weak. Explain the difficult words' meaning. For example, you can conduct a card game wherein you can give word and the right meaning and wrong meaning at the same time, and students will choose the correct one and match the cards. Allot different characters to different students. Students can be divided into groups and can be asked to rehearse the dialogues and perform it. Ask other groups to comment or give a feedback, and as a teacher you can also provide your feedback and comments. Stage 3 is improvisation. If the hero is in trouble and gets nervous, ask the students to get some solutions to his problems. Have them act out on the platform. Give enough time for them to practice. Guide them with dialogues and then let them perform. Stage 4 is detailed analysis of the story. Go through the story and ask the students some questions based on intensive reading of the text. Example, what does I lose my head mean in the story? Stage 5 is writing task. You can give some homework or you can ask students to sketch the hero or any favorite character from the story. You can ask them to write their ending to the story. Write conversations that may have taken place between a few characters, or you can ask them to write one such incident as similar to the hero of the story that they have experienced and how they got over it. It could be a real one or an imaginary one. As a variation, you can also give them a task wherein the students could be asked to draw pictures of a particular scene, and you can ask them why they chose that particular scene. They could interview the author of the short story about the incident as well. So, as a conclusion, we can say that we are supposed to teach literature by making class lively and by not sticking to the literature method only because it makes class monotonous and boring. I have listed some activities that we can conduct for teaching short stories, which would make your short story classes interactive and super engaging. Let's look at it one by one. The first activity is story cubes. You have 3-4 cubes. Each side of the cube will have different image on it. You can ask a group of students to roll the cubes and arrange them sequentially and then make them write a story. This will help them in a creative way, and it would be a kind of impromptu activity that they'll enjoy. The second interesting activity is acting out a story. You can make a group of students and ask them to act out a previously known story or give them a simple story which they can read and rehearse, and then they can be given props and also can include costumes to make it more fun. You can make a video of their performance and share it with their parents. The third one is prompt in a jar. Students one by one will pick out the prompts and then write a story based on that. Depending on the age, they can either act it out or write it down and then present. The story prompt could be in two ways, wherein you can create a rough idea about the main character, and based on that, the students can write their own story, or the book character that comes alive, or you can just give them the first line and they will write a story further. For example, it was a dark and stormy night, and then they will continue with their own imaginary version of the story. Another interesting activity could be spin a story. Create a spinner and you can write different things on this spinner, like something magical happens, weather changes, etc. Make students sit in a circle, maybe in groups. The first group will spin the wheel and create 2-3 sentences and make a good start to the story. And then they will pass on the wheel to the other group. The other group will then add the elements to the story and complete the story. If the story starts getting boring or funny or silly, you can restart a new one. The fifth activity could be draw a story. You can ask students to draw a picture based on the imaginative story that they have in their mind, and then the teacher will swap the pictures and ask others to come up with the story based on the given picture, or they are going to figure out what the person is trying to narrate. And the point is not to get the story right, but it is to be creative. Then the one who has drawn the picture can tell his version of the story, and the students will know how the stories differ based on each one's visualization skills. Another super engaging activity could be story in a box. Get a box, put 5-6 random items in a box. Students are going to pick those out and create a story which has all those items in it, and then they can write it down and then read it out. Or you can also ask the students to collect 5 to 6 items of their own and then exchange those items with their partners, and then the students can write the story of their own and read it out. They'll surely enjoy doing this activity. To conclude, we can say that select the story according to the child's age. It should be simple and easy to understand. We can use props and activities to make learning creative and interesting. Practice the use of teaching aids to make class more engaging. And use of body language and expressions while teaching will definitely make class more effective and interesting. Thank you.